The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with a low murmur of anxious conversation, its vast, circular walls shimmering with the holographic projections of delegates from across the stars. Normally a place of diplomatic formality, today's session was tense, teetering on the edge of chaos. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Selka, her luminescent blue skin pale with worry. She'd just delivered the news no one wanted to hear. "The humans have responded," she said, her voice trembling slightly as her eyes darted across the room, searching for reassurance. "And they were very polite about it." A hush fell over the chamber. Delegates exchanged uneasy glances, their appendages twitching or wings flicking in unison. Politeness from humans, they'd learned, was rarely a good thing. "Define polite," rumbled Counselor Targak, his massive form dwarfing the others as his crimson eyes narrowed. The chamber seemed to hold its collective breath, the faint hum of holographic projectors the only sound. Was it the dangerous kind? Selka hesitated. "They expressed gratitude for the information provided and assured us they would take appropriate measures to address the situation." The room erupted into chaos. Some delegates cried out in alarm, while others slumped in resignation. For those who had dealt with humanity before, the implications were clear. The humans weren't just planning to retaliate. They were planning to win, thoroughly and decisively. Halfway across the galaxy, aboard the Terran defense ship Indomitable, Captain Julia Reyes stood on the bridge, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. The holographic display before her flickered with streams of data, detailing the Galactic Council's latest communique. "They're nervous," Commander Eliaschin observed, his tone dry as he leaned casually against the console, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his concern. "I'd be too if I were them." Reyes didn't smile. Her dark eyes remained fixed on the display, her expression unreadable. "Nervous isn't enough. They need to understand what's at stake. If they don't, this whole thing could spiral out of control." Chin raised an eyebrow. "And by this whole thing, you mean the galaxy?" Reyes allowed a faint smirk. "Something like that." "Status report?" "Fleet is at full readiness," Chin replied. "We've got all major systems operational, and the first wave of deployments is standing by." "Orders?" Reyes glanced at him, her expression hardening. "Send a message to Earth Command. Inform them that the Council has been notified. And make sure our teams understand the importance of what's coming. We're not just fighting to win, we're fighting to make sure no one ever doubts us again." Back at the Galactic Council, the debate raged on. Counselor Vree, a wiry insectoid with glittering compound eyes, clicked her mandibles nervously. "Perhaps we overstepped," she said, her voice chittering. "The humans are volatile, yes, but they've also been accommodating. What if we've misjudged their intentions?" Targak's growl cut through the air. "Misjudged? You think their silence after the attack was an act of goodwill?" He leaned forward, his talons scraping against the table. "No. The humans don't act until they're certain of their response. And by the time they act, it's already too late for anyone else." The room quieted again as the weight of his words settled over the delegates. "What do you suggest then?" Selka asked, her tone cautious. Targak's eyes burned brighter. "We prepare for their response. Fortify our borders. Call in every alliance we have. If humanity truly intends to retaliate, we need to be ready to face their wrath." Vree clicked her mandibles in protest. "But escalation will only invite disaster. We need diplomacy, not further aggression." "Diplomacy is futile," Targak snapped. "The time for negotiation ended when we allowed that strike on their outpost." On the Indomitable, Reyes watched as her crew prepared for the operation. The atmosphere on the bridge was tense but focused, the quiet hum of machinery punctuated by crisp orders and acknowledgments. "Captain," Chin said, approaching with a data pad. "We've got updated intel on the Council's movements. It looks like they're trying to mobilize defensive fleets near their core systems." Reyes took the data pad and scanned the information. "Predictable," Reyes said, her tone calm but resolute. "They're going to play defense, thinking we'll take the direct approach?" Her eyes briefly flicked to the tactical display, her confidence unshaken. "And we're not?" Chin asked. "Of course not," Reyes replied. "Direct attacks are what they're expecting. We'll hit them where they least expect it." She turned to her tactical officer. "Prepare the infiltration teams. Our objective is to disable their strategic hubs. If we can cut off their coordination, their fleets will be nothing more than isolated pockets of resistance." In the council chamber, Selka's communicator buzzed urgently. She stepped away from the table, her heart pounding as she answered. "This is Selka," she said, her voice tight. "Ambassador, a frantic voice responded. You need to see this. It's the humans? Selka's stomach dropped. What about them? They've started their response. Their ships are moving, but it's not just that. They're polite. Too polite. Their transmissions are thanking us for our cooperation. Selka felt the blood drain from her face. She knew what that meant. In deep space, the first wave of the Terran fleet moved with precision. Sleek and silent, the ships spread across the sector like a web, cutting off trade routes and isolating key systems. Their approach was methodical, calculated, and terrifying in its efficiency. On the Indomitable, Reyes monitored the operation's progress, her expression unreadable. Status? She asked. Phase 1 is complete, Chin reported. All major supply lines have been severed, and their outposts are already reporting shortages. Reyes nodded. Good. Phase 2? In progress. Infiltration teams are en route to their strategic hubs, Chin said. No signs they've been detected yet? Reyes allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Perfect. Let's remind them why politeness from a human is the last thing they should want. Back at the council, the realization of humanity's strategy was beginning to dawn on the delegates. Reports of sudden disruptions and untraceable attacks flooded in, each one described with growing alarm. Supply routes vanished overnight and critical systems faltered, eroding the fragile confidence they desperately clung to. This is madness. Vri exclaimed, her mandibles clicking in panic. How are they doing this? They've taken no direct action, yet we're already falling apart. Targak's claws dug into the table. They're dismantling us piece by piece. This is what I warned you about. The humans don't fight like we do. They fight to win. Selka could only watch in silence as the panic spread. The humans had responded exactly as she'd feared, and now the galaxy would learn the cost of underestimating them. The Terran fleet's precision strikes continued to unravel the Galactic Council's defenses. Every move was calculated, every target meticulously chosen. Strategic hubs went dark one by one, their communication relays severed or commandeered. What had once been a web of interconnected power now resembled a patchwork of isolated, vulnerable nodes. On board the Indomitable, Captain Julia Reyes observed the latest tactical updates. The holographic display in front of her showed the growing chaos within the Council's ranks. Fleets scrambled without orders, convoys rerouted in panic, and alliances strained under the weight of sudden scarcity. Phase 2 is progressing as expected, Commander Elias Chin reported, his tone clipped but steady. He straightened slightly, his hands resting firmly on the console as his sharp eyes scanned the holographic display. There was a tension in his posture, a readiness that reflected the weight of the operation. Infiltration teams have successfully disabled 3 out of 5 primary hubs. The remaining 2 are proving more resistant, but they won't hold for long. Reyes nodded, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the display. Resistance is expected, Reyes said, her voice calm but edged with authority. Her gaze sharpened as she scanned the tactical display, her tone deliberate. Let's make sure they don't have time to adapt. Redirect strike teams to those hubs and escalate pressure. Yes, Captain, Chin replied, issuing orders through his console. The bridge buzzed with quiet efficiency, the crew working with practiced precision. In the depths of the Galactic Council's primary fortress on Paltrix 4, chaos reigned. The once imposing bastion of interstellar governance now echoed with frantic orders and desperate attempts to restore control. Ambassador Selka stood in the central command chamber, her eyes darting between the flickering holographic displays that painted a grim picture. What's the status of our defensive fleet? She demanded, her voice cutting through the cacophony. They're fragmented, General Orisk growled, his reptilian scales glinting under the dim emergency lights. The humans have cut off our supply lines and isolated our command centers. We can't coordinate effectively. Selka's chest tightened. Then we're already losing. Orisk's eyes narrowed. Not yet. If we consolidate our forces and launch a counterstrike, we might regain the initiative. We need to show the humans that we won't be dismantled without a fight. Selka hesitated, torn between Orisk's boldness and her growing fear of the humans' calculated response. Make it happen, she said finally, her voice betraying none of the turmoil within. But be prepared for retaliation. The humans don't leave loose ends. On the Indomitable, Reyes and her crew monitored the Council's attempts to regroup. The tactical display revealed a concentrated effort to rally their fleets near Paltrix 4, the heart of the Council's military command. They're consolidating, Chin observed. Looks like they're trying to mount a counteroffensive. Reyes allowed a faint smile. Good. That's exactly what we want. Inform the fleet to maintain pressure on the remaining hubs, but redirect our long-range artillery to Paltrix 4. Let's remind them why humans are not to be underestimated. The crew moved quickly, executing her orders with the precision born of countless drills. Within moments, the first salvo of long-range strikes arced across the void, targeting key infrastructure on Paltrix 4. Explosions lit up the planet's surface as power grids and defensive emplacements were reduced to rubble. In the council chamber on Paltrix 4, the impact of the strikes was immediate and devastating. The lights flickered as shockwaves rattled the fortress. Selka braced herself against a console, her heart pounding as the walls trembled. "Report," she shouted. "Direct hits on multiple sectors," a technician stammered. "Our power grid is failing and we've lost 2 primary shield generators." Selka turned to Orisk, her voice steady despite the panic around her. "You wanted to show the humans we can fight back. Now's your chance." Orisk snarled, baring sharp teeth. "Deploy the fleet. All remaining ships are to converge on the human positions. We'll force them into direct engagement." The Terran fleet awaited the Council's response with calm efficiency. The atmosphere on the bridge was electric, a tense anticipation hanging in the air as officers worked with silent precision. Reyes stood at the center, her gaze fixed on the tactical display, her posture radiating confidence as the enemy's fleet began to mobilize. "They're coming," Chin said. "Looks like a full-scale assault." "Right on schedule," Reyes replied. "Prepare the fleet to intercept. Maintain formation and keep our flanks protected. This is where we make our statement." The Indomitable and its accompanying ships shifted into position, their sleek forms gleaming under the starlight. As the Council's fleet approached, the void between them seemed to hum with anticipation. "Admiral Steele is en route with reinforcements," Chin noted. "He'll arrive in 40 minutes? "More than enough time," Reyes said. "Let's show them what we can do." The battle that unfolded was a testament to humanity's tactical brilliance. The Terran fleet moved with unparalleled coordination, their ships weaving through the chaos with practiced ease. Flanking maneuvers cut through enemy lines, while decoy ships lured the Council's forces into devastating crossfire. The hum of plasma cannons and the brilliant flashes of explosions painted the void, each strike systematically dismantling the enemy's defenses. Each strike was deliberate, targeting the Council's vulnerabilities with surgical precision. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Reyes issued orders with calm authority. "Focus fire on their command ships. Disrupt their chain of command and force them into disarray." The crew responded immediately, the Indomitable's main cannons unleashing a barrage of plasma fire that tore through the lead enemy vessel. Explosions rippled across its hull, and its lights flickered before it drifted lifelessly into the void. In the Council's command chamber, Selka watched the battle unfold with a sinking feeling. Their fleet was being outmaneuvered at every turn, their once imposing ships now reduced to desperate shadows of their former might. "This can't be happening," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Orisk slammed a clawed fist onto the table. "We need reinforcements. Where are the reserves?" "Cut off," a technician replied. "The humans have blockaded all major routes. We're on our own." Selka closed her eyes, the weight of their defeat pressing down on her like a physical burden. Her thoughts swirled with regret and fear, each misstep playing back in agonizing clarity. The once confident command chamber now felt suffocating, its walls echoing with the quiet murmurs of despair as technicians scrambled for solutions that wouldn't come. They had underestimated humanity, assuming their polite demeanor masked weakness, and now they were paying the ultimate price for their hubris. Back on the Indomitable, Reyes watched as the Council's fleet began to crumble. The tactical display showed pockets of resistance collapsing under the relentless assault. "Captain," Chin said, his voice quiet but firm. "The enemy is in full retreat." Reyes nodded, her expression unreadable. "Let them go. They'll carry the message better than we ever could." She turned to the communications officer. "Prepare a message for the Council. Make it clear that this was not a war, they brought this upon themselves. And if they want peace, they'll have to come to us on our terms." The officer saluted. "Yes, Captain." As the message was transmitted, Reyes allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The battle had been won, but the real challenge lay ahead. Humanity's politeness had masked a deadly resolve, and now the galaxy would think twice before underestimating them again. The Galactic Council's fleets were in full retreat, scattering chaotically to the edges of the galaxy, their shattered formations leaving behind trails of burning debris. The coordinated precision of the Terran forces had left them shattered, their once mighty formations reduced to disarray. Yet even as victory seemed assured, Captain Julia Reyes knew the work was far from over. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the atmosphere was one of cautious relief. The tactical display showed the remnants of the Council's fleet retreating, their energy signatures growing fainter as they fled into the void. Commander Elias Chin stood at Reyes' side, his expression one of wary satisfaction. "They're pulling back," Chin said, his voice cautiously optimistic as he leaned slightly closer to the tactical display. "Looks like they've had enough, but I wouldn't celebrate just yet." Reyes' gaze remained fixed on the display. "Not quite. Desperation makes them dangerous. Have the fleet maintain pursuit at a safe distance. I don't want to give them any opportunities for ambushes." "Understood," Chin replied, relaying her orders to the fleet. Meanwhile, on Paltrix 4, the heart of the Council's operations lay in ruins. Fires raged unchecked across the once pristine cities, casting an orange glow against the choking black smoke that spiraled into the atmosphere, blotting out the faint light of the sun. In the command chamber, Ambassador Selka stared at the shattered displays, her mind racing through grim possibilities. General Orisk, his uniform torn and bloodied, stood across from her. His reptilian eyes burned with frustration. "We need to regroup, Ambassador. Find a way to salvage what's left of our forces." "And go where?" Selka snapped, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. "Every major system is either blockaded or under attack. The humans have us cornered." Orisk's claws scraped against the metal table. "Then we must make contact. Negotiate. Offer them whatever they want to end this." Selka's expression hardened. "What they want is for us to understand that we've lost. They don't negotiate from weakness, General. And right now, weakness is all we have." In deep space, the Terran fleet continued its advance, securing key systems and dismantling the last vestiges of the Council's resistance. On board the Indomitable, Reyes convened with her senior officers in the war room, the holographic map of the galaxy casting a pale glow across their faces. "The Council's infrastructure is in complete disarray," Chin reported, pointing to a cluster of red markers on the display. "Their trade routes are severed and their fleets are scattered. What's left of their forces is retreating to uncharted territories." "Good," Reyes said. "But we're not done. Desperation can lead to unpredictability, and we can't afford any surprises." Tactical Officer Mira Albright leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Captain, if I may, our forces are spread thin. Maintaining blockades across this many systems will stretch us to the limit. Perhaps it's time to consider their inevitable surrender." Reyes' eyes narrowed. "Surrender is not just about winning a battle, officer. It's about making sure they never think to rise against us again. We'll maintain pressure until their surrender is unconditional and absolute." On a remote outpost near the Council's borders, remnants of the fleeing fleet regrouped. The station's commander, a wiry insectoid named Velric, monitored the incoming ships with mounting despair. Their once proud vessels limped into the station's orbit, scarred and broken from their encounters with the Terran fleet. "Commander," an officer called out, their voice trembling. "The humans are closing in. They've already cut off 3 of our supply lines." Velric's mandibles clicked nervously. "Prepare the station for evacuation. Prioritize the wounded and essential personnel. We can't hold this position." "And what about the rest?" the officer asked. Velric's mandibles twitched. "They'll have to fend for themselves." Back on the Indomitable, Reyes received the latest intelligence reports. The Council's attempts to regroup were faltering, their movements chaotic and uncoordinated. She turned to Chin. "Their outposts are crumbling," she said. "It's time to make our final push." Chin raised an eyebrow. "Final push, Captain? Are you suggesting?" Reyes' expression hardened, her voice steely and unwavering. "I'm suggesting we end this. Completely. No half measures, no chances for recovery. The galaxy needs to see, without any doubt, what happens when you challenge humanity." The final phase of the Terran campaign began with a coordinated strike on the last remaining strongholds of the Galactic Council. Across the galaxy, Terran ships descended on their targets with precision, each attack designed to cripple the Council's ability to resist. The void erupted into a kaleidoscope of destruction, each explosion sending ripples of light across the darkness as Terran forces dismantled the Council's power with brutal precision. Within hours, their resistance had collapsed entirely. On Paltrix 4, Selka watched the devastation unfold from a secure bunker. The fortress shook with each impact, the walls cracking under the relentless assault. She clutched a communicator, her voice trembling as she sent a final message to the Terran fleet. "This is Ambassador Selka of the Galactic Council," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. "We surrender. On behalf of the Council, we acknowledge humanity's superiority. Please show mercy." The response was swift and clinical. "Message received, Ambassador," came the reply. "Terms of surrender will be transmitted shortly. Prepare to comply." Selka closed her eyes, the weight of their defeat pressing down on her. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying the ultimate price. Back on the Indomitable, Reyes stood on the observation deck, staring out at the debris field that marked the Council's final stand. The stars beyond seemed brighter now, their light unbroken by the shadow of defiance. Chin joined her, his expression contemplative. "It's over, Captain." Reyes nodded slowly. "For now. But they'll remember this. And the next time someone thinks to challenge us, they'll think twice." As the Terran fleet regrouped, the galaxy remained eerily silent. The humans had spoken, not with words, but with actions that would echo for generations. Their politeness, once misinterpreted as weakness, was revealed to be the prelude to unyielding dominance. The Galactic Council's surrender rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave, eliciting mixed reactions from distant colonies and alien civilizations. Some celebrated humanity's dominance, while others bristled with unease, whispering fears of what this newfound power might mean. The news of humanity's victory reached even the most distant colonies, carried by whispers of awe and fear. For those who had underestimated the Terrans, it was a grim lesson in the cost of arrogance. For humanity, it was a statement, a declaration that they would not be trifled with. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Julia Reyes reviewed the terms of surrender sent by Ambassador Selka. The Council's capitulation was absolute, their resources, territories, and fleets all placed under Terran oversight. It wasn't just a surrender, it was a dismantling of their autonomy. "They've accepted every condition," Commander Elias Chin said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Even the dissolution of their military infrastructure." Reyes nodded, her expression calm but unreadable. Her tone carried a steely certainty. "They know they don't have a choice. Anything less would leave them vulnerable to retaliation from their own allies, and they're smart enough to realize that humanity doesn't bluff." Chin glanced at the tactical display. "Still, this feels extreme. We've effectively crippled them." Reyes' eyes flicked to him, sharp and calculating. "That was the point. The galaxy needs to see the consequences of challenging us. This isn't just about survival, it's about ensuring they never question our resolve again." On Paltrix 4, the remnants of the Council's leadership gathered in the ruins of their command chamber, its once gleaming walls now marred with scorch marks and crumbling under the weight of collapsed beams. Ambassador Selka stood at the center, her once pristine robes now stained and torn. The weight of their defeat pressed heavily on her shoulders as she addressed the remaining delegates. "This is the reality we face," she said, her voice weary but firm. "Our arrogance brought this upon us. Humanity's politeness wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a warning. One we ignored." The room was silent, the delegates too consumed by shame and fear to respond. General Orisk finally broke the silence, his voice a low growl. "What now?" he asked. "Do we simply accept their terms and fade into obscurity?" Selka's gaze hardened. "We rebuild. Quietly. Carefully. And we ensure that we never make the same mistake again." The Terran fleet's victory was celebrated across Earth and its colonies. Parades marched through cities, and broadcasts hailed the strategic brilliance of Captain Reyes and her crew. Yet, in quieter corners, veterans and scholars alike pondered the cost of such dominance, their reflections casting a shadow over the jubilant crowds. Yet beneath the surface of the celebrations, a quiet unease lingered. Humanity's rise to dominance had come at a cost, one measured not just in lives, but in the way they were now perceived by the galaxy. On the Indomitable, Reyes watched the celebrations on a muted screen in her quarters. Her face was stoic, her thoughts turning to the battles they'd fought and the choices they'd made. The galaxy would remember this victory, but what would they remember about humanity? A soft chime pulled her from her thoughts. Chin entered, a datapad in hand. "Captain, the Council's formal statement has been transmitted. They've pledged full compliance with the surrender terms." Reyes nodded. "Good. And the reconstruction efforts?" "Already underway," Chin replied. "We've deployed teams to oversee the transition and ensure there's no resistance." Reyes leaned back, her gaze distant. "History will judge us for what we've done here, Commander. Let's make sure it judges us fairly." Months later, the galaxy had begun to adjust to its new reality. The Terran Oversight Council established a fragile peace, ensuring that no single power could rise to challenge their authority. Trade routes reopened, and former Council territories saw the gradual return of stability under humanity's watchful eye. Ambassador Selka, now leading what remained of the Galactic Council, worked tirelessly to maintain the tenuous cooperation. Though humanity's control was absolute, their approach was measured, firm but not oppressive. It was a strategy designed not just to maintain order, but to foster grudging respect. In one of the former Council's grand halls, now repurposed for diplomatic meetings, Selka addressed a gathering of delegates from across the galaxy. "We have learned the cost of arrogance," she said, her voice steady. "Humanity's actions have reshaped our galaxy, but they have also given us an opportunity. If we wish to endure, we must adapt. Together." The delegates murmured their agreement, their unity born from necessity rather than trust. Selka's words carried weight, but the scars of their defeat remained fresh. Back on Earth, Captain Reyes stood at the edge of a quiet cliff overlooking the ocean. The wind tugged at her uniform as she gazed out at the horizon, her thoughts drifting. She had been lauded as a hero, celebrated for her role in humanity's ascension, yet the burden of their victory weighed heavily on her. Chin approached, his footsteps crunching softly against the gravel. "You know, Captain, you could let yourself enjoy the victory once in a while." Reyes gave a faint smile, though her eyes remained distant. "Victory isn't always something to celebrate, Commander. It's something to learn from." Chin nodded, falling silent as he joined her in watching the waves. For a moment, neither spoke, the quiet offering a reprieve from the galaxy's noise. Finally, Reyes turned to him. "The galaxy will recover, Elias. And when it does, we need to be ready. Not just for their response, but for what we might become if we don't keep ourselves in check." "And if they rise against us again?" Chin asked. Reyes' gaze hardened, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of unshakable resolve. The air around her seemed to still, as if the gravity of her words hung palpably in the space between them. "Then we remind them why they shouldn't?" As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and gold, humanity's future loomed large. A future shaped by victory, tempered by vigilance, and defined by the delicate balance of power.